Greetings. In the last video I basically discussed the two first stanzas of the Håvamål initiation myth, where Idunn explains that he hung in the world tree and descended into the realm of the fate goddesses, in which he picked up the runes of fate, understood them, and shared them with the beings of the world. I talked about how the description of his trial could reflect real rituals of initiation that actually took place in the pagan world of the Vikings and their Iron Age predecessors. These people are known to us as Germanic people. This was a name assigned to them by the Romans 2000 years ago. From the outside, you see, the so-called Germanics looked similar. From the inside, they were quite obsessively tribal. The tribes shared a certain common root language and could understand each other, and they seem to have all originated in Bronze Age Scandinavia, from which many a tribe migrated and thus shared certain cultural and mythological basic structures. However, it is important when you look at the past to realize that history is a matter of editing down a lot of contradictory and confusingly diverse information into a coherent whole. To actually say that all the Germanic people all over Northern Europe for 1,000 years or so thought this and did that is a bit too simple. The truth is that despite a common Bronze Age root, even that root would turn out to be amazingly diverse if you started to look at it closely. The truth is that the people of the past were as different and diverse in outlook and experience as we are today, sometimes even more so because they were more isolated, they didn't have TV or internet. When it came to cultural values, war and peace, class structures and gender roles, matriarchy and patriarchy, which gods were the most popular, things changed. And it changed all the time, from tribe to tribe, from generation to generation, from century to century. Apart from language, there are only a few things that seem to have been shared all the time by all the tribes, or by most of the tribes, and one of these was the presence of a powerful group of women who seemed to have been something in between priestesses and witches. Their power and their influence was quite strong throughout the tribes, independent of the changing roles of women in general, or the degree of warlike behavior in the tribe. If their tribe was warlike, the priestesses participated in war strategy, and many are the sources showing how Germanic chiefs listened intently to their advice, as these priestesses were considered to be allied with the goddesses of fate, and thus the outcome of everything, even war. However, whether the tribe was comparably peaceful or very warlike, the priestesses of the tribe were considered to be their source of wisdom, and I think perhaps generally they were. As I talked about in part 11, some Germanic tribes, such as the Goths, got rid of their priestesses quite early, and they were also the first tribe to become Christian, and to sack the great goddess mystery temple of Eleusis, and to actually even sack Rome, destroy civilization, and start the Dark Ages. Go figure. Well, I'm talking about the priestesses again, because as I also mentioned in part 11, they partook in male initiation rituals, and one of their most important functions there seemed to have been the ritual serving of a magical brew, usually referred to as the precious mead. Archaeology testifies that all over northern Europe from about 700 BC and until the end of the Viking Age during the 10th century AD, great ladies were buried with full ritual gear, graves that show their importance and their power in life as well as their profession. They were leaders of rituals and users of magic, and not the least, they were servers of the precious mead. These ladies serving mead are part of a very important recurring theme in the Norse myths, that of a supernatural lady in the underworld who serves the precious mead after the hero has undergone dangerous trials of initiation. There is also a sacred marriage involved. The lady of the myths is, through metaphorical mythical attributes, identified as the goddess Freya, who indeed is supposed to meet the chosen dead in her ninth realm of the cosmos. It seems probable that the ladies who participated in such rituals in real life also were supposed to represent the goddess, temporarily present in a living woman during the ritual. You may wonder why I'm talking about this when I was going to continue the talk about the hanging of Odin. Well, as I said last time, I was discussing the two first stanzas in the hanging story, in which he basically hung and then descended to the roots of the world tree, in which he grasped the runes of destiny. This was not the only thing that happened there. In the following stanza, you see, number 140, Odin explains how he was taught 9 Fimbuljóð, which means 9 powerful songs, by his maternal uncle. And I shall talk about what they may have meant and what the maternal uncle may have meant in a ritual context later. For now I shall move on to how these 9 spell songs led Odin to a place where he, according to the stanza, received a precious drink of mead poured out from poetry blend. Nothing more is said about this event in these particular stanzas, but that is a typical Old Norse poetic way of making a metaphorical riddle, referring to something the listener is expected to already know and be able to deduce for themselves. Luckily, the precious mead and the poetry blend is mentioned and described in more detail earlier in the same poem, which is why the theme is not elaborated more here. Because if you had paid proper attention to what was being said earlier, you would realize that here comes another piece of the puzzle that adds to our knowledge of the whole sacred story. Now, those of you who already know a bit about Norse mythology have probably heard the story of how Odin stole the mead of poetry from the giants. If you have probably been presented with the version told by Snorri in the prose Edda. I'm going to stick to an older version, the version of the Håvamål of the Poetic Edda, because that version is older and more authentic and is not trying to hide what it was all about. You see, Snorri was trying to disguise the initiation team so as to get away with writing about the pagan lore in the first place. He told us how Odin tricked a giant maiden into sleeping with him so that he could drink all her mead and run off. He describes the girl as loose-lived and dim-witted, but the Håvamål tells another story. In the Håvamål, we are told that Odin went to the land of the age-old giant called Suttungur, which means heavy with drink. This is, I believe, one of the many names of the world giant who lives in the cosmic ocean beneath the world tree, together with his wife Ran and their 9 daughters. In his halls, Odin, helped by the 9 spell songs taught to him on the way, displays his eloquence and in this way mysteriously saves his own life. It is made very clear that he would not have died if he could not talk himself out of it. The world he has come to is a dark, deadly realm. It's a realm of death, in fact, an underworld, as shown by its attributes of being dark and rocky and deadly, and in fact situated within a mound, a burial mound. It is not so difficult perhaps to imagine that the people who let the initiates hang for 9 days and almost die would not hesitate to place them in a muck burial mound afterwards, in which they were to achieve their consecration, the marriage with the lady of the dead. You see, when Odin had managed to use his intelligence and eloquence to survive in this underworld, he swears a sacred ring oath which is the same as being married. And then the giantess called Gunnlöd, whose name means invitation to battle, is revealed to him, sitting on a golden chair, offering him the precious mead that she guards. They get married, and later she helps him turn into a drill snake or an eagle, different versions here, so that he can escape death and return to Earth. There is a betrayal theme in the story that I will have to go into later. For now, let it suffice to say that this is as close as a myth can get to describing real-life ritual. There is evidence that people did go through mock sacrifice to Odin, in which they were mock hanged and mock stabbed, in which they fasted for 9 days and definitely faced death, but with a certain chance of returning to life. There is textual and archaeological evidence that people would indeed meditate on top of or even walk ritually into burial mounds in order to converse with the spirit beings of the underworld. There is even archaeological and textual evidence that priestesses existed whose job it was to preside over a sacred mead drinking ritual, and that they were even buried with the serving spoon in their hands, ready to offer the mead to a brave warrior who dared to seek her underworld abode. And historians and archaeologists alike all agree that some sort of sacred marriage in connection to initiation rituals seem to have taken place both during the Scandinavian Bronze Age and in the Iron Age tribes known to us as the Germanics, as well as during the Viking Age. And I think it's also something that happened with the Celts. Well, anyway, I think it all adds up. The story of Odin hanging reflects, describes and attempts to explain the origin of a very important ritual of initiation that may have been shared by most of these Germanic tribes. It was a ritual of initiation undergone by men who sought to rule their own fate, to wake up the sleeping fate goddess within and symbolically marry her, to gain access to esoteric knowledge and abilities, and to become something apart from the ordinary, whether that was to become a great warrior, a sorcerer, a priest, a bard, or a king. The story of the hanging also tells the tale of how the path of initiation for men was instigated, because it was first staked out by Odin, and he had learned it from the ancient witch, and she, before he asked her to teach him, she was teaching the women only. Now Odin learned it, and he taught it to his priest, and because of his deed, it is stated in the poem, because he did this, because he died, because he learned, because he resurrected, he became a god. The poem is very clear about it. He wasn't a god before that. He became a god through this ritual of initiation, a god with the right to receive the annual apple of restoration from the goddess, an apple that ensures his divine immortality, which is not so accurately immortality but rather the ability to transform death over and over as his youth is restored every year. In part 11, I talked about how Freyja, in the shape of a witch, showed to Odin how to conquer fate, the ultimate fate being death, and that this led him to seek that knowledge. In that myth, the goddess is called Golden Brew, which refers to the precious mead. Throughout the myths, the mead is referred to and described as precious, ancient, filled with universal memory, with power, with poetry, with creative power, knowledge, and the power to transform. It is guarded by the goddess in all her countless shapes. Hel guards it but keeps it under lock. Giantesses offer it when heroes have had the courage to reach their underworld halls. Freyja guards it and offers it to those who are allowed into her halls after death. The Valkyries offer it to the chosen of Valhalla, and they draw their mead from the teats of the goat Heidrun, which means bright secret. And this she-goat, identified as Freyja herself in a poem, produces the mead by nourishing herself from the world tree. This world tree again is nourished by the well of origin, the Urdarbrunner, by the oldest fate goddess called Urdur, meaning origin. And in the Rafngalder Odins, in the Raven's spell song of Odin, we learn that the keeper of the mead of poetry is in fact the fate goddess Origin, so that ultimately we may say that the mead is essentially the waters of origin, the waters of fate, death, resurrection and memory, and as Snorri describes it in his prose Edda, those waters. He says, those who come into that sacred water of the fate goddesses will emerge transformed, shining and transparent, like the membrane of the inside of an eggshell. So, I'm going to finish here. So, have a nice day.